Did Isaac Wilson prove on Saturday that he's Utah's quarterback of the future? And after their worst showing of the season, is Utah's defense ready for Oklahoma State? All that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you want to join the conversation every day, you can find us in the YouTube comments as well as on social media. Appreciate all of you who do support this channel every single day. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. You can go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB. It's all caps, no spaces, to receive 20% off your order. My name is Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, now that we've had a day to kind of digest it, go back and watch everything, we got to talk about what Isaac Wilson was able to do. And then we'll touch on a little bit the Utah defense's performance and what it means for them coming up on Saturday with their biggest test yet in Oklahoma State, and give a little bit of a brief and quick overview of this Oklahoma State team. And in order to help me do that, it's friend of the show, KSL Sports' Alex Napoles, kind enough to join me here. And Alex, talking about what Isaac Wilson was able to do. And look, he did not play well against Baylor for the majority of that game, but we also talked about on the show, I felt like there were other parts of the offense that also let Isaac down in that game. He did not start the Utah State game perfectly, or just, I should say, very well, but once he settled in, it was really good yesterday, particularly in the second half. You know, Utah had just over like 100, only 108 passing yards to show for it, but the offense just looked that much crisper, right? When you look at the total yards in general for the second half, Utah 248 yards in the second half compared to 212. I just felt like Wilson really grew as this game wore on, and even in the second quarter was better than the first quarter. I thought he showed really good downfield accuracy. I thought he showed improved pocket presence. There were multiple times where pressure came in, and rather just tuck it down and run, he kept his eyes downfield. There was even a time where a blitz came in, and rather than panicking, he moved to his left and fired a strike downfield. So I feel like he is growing, and I feel like based on what I saw from his growth through the season and the potential, this is a guy who hasn't even been playing college football for a year. He enrolled in Utah back in the spring early, and I think all he's done is grow. The fact that he won the backup job already, the fact that he made a number of impressive throws in this game already has done enough for me to say he should be Utah's quarterback of the future. I'm not saying they shouldn't also, continue to recruit high-level quarterbacks, but what I'm more so saying is if the Will Rogers, like Washington added Will Rogers from Mississippi State, if that type of a player became available, I'd rather Utah pass on him. So basically not bring in an established veteran, unless it's someone like you just can't say no to, because I feel good enough about Wilson that I do think he's this team's quarterback of the future based on the potential signs we've seen already through 3 games played for him.
And I mean, look, when you look at Isaac Wilson, like you mentioned, he hasn't even been playing college ball for a year yet. He's barely starting up. He's a true freshman, just straight out of high school. It's going to take time, and I think it's no secret, and I think not a lot of people can argue that what we saw in that second half and kind of towards the end of that second quarter really was probably the best performance, of course, of Isaac Wilson's young career. Yeah. And that's just because he's growing, he's learning, he's getting more comfortable in the offense, he's getting more comfortable in the system, he's getting more more comfortable in being a college player and no longer a high school player. Obviously, we saw what he can do in high school. He has all the tools to be fantastic. And I think it's finally translating over to the college level. We saw it, like I said, late in that second quarter and through a majority of that second half against Utah State.
We did. And it's incredibly exciting to see his continued growth with this offense. You look at Saturday, he became the youngest quarterback ever for Utah to throw for 3 touchdown passes, 239 yards at all. And what really encouraged me, right, it wasn't just like dink and dump off types of passes. There were a number of passes to Dorian Singer and Brant Keithy down the field. The ball to Caleb Lohner, right? He threw it where only Lohner could get it in the end zone, and that's what he's able to do. Now, I'm not saying that Isaac Wilson is ready to. If Isaac Wilson had to start on Saturday against Oklahoma State, the game would obviously be in the Cowboys' favor. There's part of me that would still be like, hey, Utah can go in there and win, but the truth is that'd be incredibly hard. But I do feel like with what Wilson has shown, his continued growth and development, that there's a lot of reason to believe as he continues to develop behind Cam Rising this year, as he gets the majority of the reps next year going into the season, that he'll be ready to start for Utah. I think it's unrealistic to expect him to be Cam Rising even as soon as next year, because when you look at how much experience Cam had before he started, that was just another level of what you're going to get out of a veteran QB like that. But as Isaac grows into that player, it's clear his ceiling is higher than what Cam Rising has shown. He has a stronger arm, right? His speed is also something that, Cam is a smart scrambler, but I believe, 40-yard dash, like I think Wilson's going to win that. So I think there's some dual threat ability that exists there with Wilson too. He was very successful with his legs at Corner Canyon. This is a guy who I think has all the potential and the tools in the world to be successful. So I don't want Utah to go add like veteran talent really that would scare Wilson away and be like, wait a minute, this team doesn't have faith in me. I want to transfer out of here. That's not what I'm saying is going to happen. But I think I want to see Utah stick by Wilson more so when the transfer portal window opens. Once again, unless that quarterback, a level of like, we can't like afford to pass this guy up, comes your way. Outside of that, when those mid-tier quarterbacks are kind of making the rounds, I would rather Utah stand pat, because I think if they really commit themselves to Isaac Wilson, I think this whole team is going to reap the benefits. And once again, I just think he has shown the potential of why he was a high 4-star level recruit. I know what he did was against Utah State, but when you look at the individual throws in the moment and like, okay, like this is just a tough throw you have to make. There's a number of examples on Saturday of Wilson making that throw. And for him to already be making those types of throws so early, on top of, like we mentioned, already beating out some experienced quarterbacks like a Brandon Rose, I'll say experienced in terms of having been in Utah's system for a long time. How can I not take that as a positive sign that his development is already rapidly changing over the course of the season, just because of the experience he's even getting from playing in these games, which there's no experience like game experience. And I just was really impressed with what I've seen from Wilson, and I'm really excited about his future. I'm trying not to overreact to what I saw Saturday, Alex, but it's hard not to in some ways because of how many positives there were to take away from his performance.
It was. It's hard. It's hard not to overreact because there was so many good positives that we saw from Isaac Wilson as he kind of grew into the game. And it wasn't going to be an easy game to begin with, right? It's your first road game. It's your first away trip as a college football player, and it's in a hostile environment. It's in an environment where Utah State fans and Utah State players were going to want to beat Utah. This was a big game for them. And we saw from Utah State that they rose to the occasion. We saw that they were fired up for this one, man. And so from the beginning, it wasn't going to be an easy game. And so, I mean, yes, there was concerns. There was a little bit of a concern at the beginning when Utah's offense struggled. There was concern, being down 14-3 on the road. It's not a good sign, but I think it speaks a lot more to Isaac Wilson, and it speaks a lot more to this offense when they're able to steer the ship in the right direction and come back and fix those mistakes and be more prolific, like in that second half. And it just goes to show you that the growth of Isaac Wilson is there, and we're going to continue to see it the more and more he takes those live game snaps and those live game opportunities.
Think about guys like Connor O'Toole and how much they've developed over a course of the season back in like 2022 when he first made the transition to defensive end. In-season development is a massive thing, and I do believe we'll continue to see that out of Isaac Wilson. Even as he just gets those reps in practice, they won't be as many, but he took a big leap forward yesterday to me, even if it was against a group of 5 team and not a power 5 team. And I'll also say this, I am not suggesting that Kyle Whittingham should come out to his press conference that we'll all be listening to on Monday and go, Isaac Wilson is our starting quarterback in 2025. But like I said, what I want Utah to do is take the steps of showing their support for Wilson by standing pat more so in the transfer portal, not bringing in a guy who's like, okay, he didn't light it up as his previous school, but he's a veteran QB. I would rather see Utah add quality additions around Wilson. If you want to get a veteran backup type of player, I think that could be a fine move too, but like stick with the guys you have in-house, including a Wyatt Becker next year, who I think has a chance to do some really good things at the University of Utah. So I think Wilson has done enough to put himself in position where Utah doesn't need to panic about their quarterback room in 2025, just with how much he's already developed in this season. And speaking of not panicking, the Utah defense did not look fantastic for the majority of the first half, giving up 14 points to Utah State, which was already the most they'd actually given up in a game in the season. And they just gave it up in a half to a group of 5 team. Now they got to turn around and face an Oklahoma State team that's thrown up 30 a couple times now on the season. Should we be panicking about this Utah defense? I don't think so. And I'm going to be telling you all why in one moment. But first, want to take an opportunity to tell you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at 5-Hour Energy. Want to get in shape, but having trouble staying motivated? Make 5-Hour Energy shots part of your lifestyle and get the energy boost you need to get fit. We all know you sometimes don't want to go to the gym. I know I've definitely been there too. That's where 5-Hour Energy can be a huge boost to your day. You can take a 5-Hour Energy shot to give you the feeling and alertness you need so you can get through your workout. 5-Hour Energy is a brand that's been trusted by hardworking people like you for over 20 years to give you that alert, energized feeling you need to get through a busy and hectic day. And you know where to find 5-Hour Energy shots at, right? You get them right at the cash register at nearly every convenience and drugstore nationwide. You can stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energized 5-Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. So do not spell out FIVE. You just write the number 5 on there. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, so you can go to 5hourenergy.com today and start getting the energy boost you need to get through the day. All right, Alex, looking at this Utah defense, gave up once again through 3 games. They gave up 14 points in the first half to Utah State. They hadn't given that up against Southern Utah or against Baylor. And now you're going to set to take on what is by far your toughest offense you will have seen in one of the best players overall in college football, and Ollie Gordon coming up, and some nice receivers that Oklahoma State has too, I'll add. We'll be previewing them throughout the week on this show. But I think then you can look at how Utah's defense play and you could be like, wow, they got gashed by a group of 5 team in the first half. Is that going to train? Is that what's going to happen when they face a really good offense in Stillwater? I don't think so. Utah already said this. Kyle Whittingham did. Utah did some different things in the first half defensively to try to confuse Bryson Barnes. They used the game plan they used against USC in 2022. That was one where they only had one defensive tackle on the field at key times. And Utah State was able to gash him on the ground a few times because of that adjustment. And because of that change, they decided Van Fillinger would often be the other D tackle next to a Keanu Tanavasa or Junior Shafuna. And Van is a very good defensive end. Van is not known for being to stand up a double team from 2 offensive linemen. So that's where Utah ran themselves into trouble a lot in the first half. And I also thought it was a case of, look, some really good receivers on Utah State making some nice plays downfield. Now that's what could be a concern going to the Oklahoma State game. But once Utah defense got settled in, went back to what makes this team so stout defensively with that proper 4-man front, things got a lot better in the second half, as evident. If you look at the first half, 261 yards for the Aggies. In the second half, that number dipped all the way down to 124 yards in total. Only 59 passing yards, only 65 rushing yards. When this Utah defense started to click, and I'll also add, they didn't have Karene Reed in the first half. So once those other guys, the Sione Vakia, Trey Reynolds, we saw in there too, once they also got settled in a little bit more, their play improved. When Utah gets Karene Reed back, they're still one of the best front sevens in college football. And I know that Utah is going to load the box and they're going to be ready for Ollie Gordon next week. I do expect this run defense to return to the form, and really outside of one half, they've been fantastic on the season. I think Oklahoma State will have a chance to make some plays downfield because of the level of receivers they have. And Utah's defensive backs still guys like Elijah Davis now, and as well as we get a Smith Snowden out there. They don't have the most experience in the world, still capable of making great plays. The Smith Snowden interception, unreal. Cameron Calhoun's interception, unreal. But I still feel like this Utah defense is one of the best in college football. I think yesterday's was more a product of the poor first half, was more of poor defensive schematic game planning to me, as well as some guys getting acclimated and not having a best player out there. And I also should throw in, Alex, the fact that you are playing a guy like Bryson Barnes, who doesn't know this Utah defense so well, even when they try to do things a little differently.
Exactly. When I look at the defensive performance from Utah against Utah State, that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? This is a guy who practiced for the last 2 years against this defense. He knows this defense. He knows those players. And so it's a little bit different. I feel like when you have that familiarity now facing them, right, with Utah State. I also think a lot of it can be attributed to Karene Reed changing to a new scheme and installing something new without one of your best linebackers, if not but I mean, him and Lander, obviously, but not having Karene Reed, who's such a vocal leader out there. I think we kind of definitely saw it in that first half against Utah State. And then I think you kind of have to go back to that old adage, that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So maybe changing to a different scheme. I get wanting to confuse Bryson Barnes because he knows this defense. I understand that part of it. But if it isn't broken, don't change things up. You know what works. You know what's effective for this defense. You know the results that you're going to get from this defense with that system and that scheme that you've already had installed for the first two games of the season. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep, and I do think this is something where now that Utah has seen what does and doesn't work, they're going to get back to their bread and butter, and I think they are going to be immensely successful. This Utah team is also going to be really fired up to go to both teams, Utah and Oklahoma State, are going to be so fired up and motivated for this game on Saturday because Utah has heard all offseason about how can this soft team, which is a total just false narrative, but that's what fans from the Big 12 have been saying about this Utah team. How can this finesse team from the Pac-12 think they're going to walk in, be voted preseason favorite, and have success in the Big 12? That's the narrative that Utah can hype themselves up on before the game. And then if you are Oklahoma State, you are telling yourself, like, how is this team they're getting all the accolades and everything? This is still our conference. Like, we're not in terms of they run the conference, but they're one of the best teams that left in it. You can make an argument that Oklahoma State from the past decade is the best program that remained in the Big 12 for football consistency since Texas and Oklahoma have departed the conference. So both these teams are going to be so incredibly fired up versus obviously Utah's defense, like you mentioned, Alex, just all these guys who, played high school football in Utah, were dreaming of going to Utah, instead ended up at Utah State. This was their revenge game. They were fired up. And Utah also we know the effect of, and I like Isaac Wilson. Once again, I think he's going to be this team's quarterback of the future, but there is something about Wilson is still winning everyone over versus Cam Rising has. So there were a lot of things working against Utah on Saturday that I just think they'll be fired up, and we'll see this normal version of Utah's defense come Saturday. But one thing I will say, I think we'll also see, and I'm curious if you agree, Alex, I do think that where Oklahoma State is going to have success is through the air against Utah. Utah is not shutting out Oklahoma State by any means. And I think most of Oklahoma State's plays are probably going to come on big plays through the air. Offensive line for Oklahoma State has not performed fantastically through the first few weeks of the season. Ollie Gordon only averaging 3.5 yards a carry because teams are loading up the box on him. So it's going to come down to those receivers making plays. And Oklahoma State has several receivers who've already been making plays this fall. And I do think as good as Utah's corners are, I think they're going to lose some of those one-on-one battles, just like we saw them do the same as they fell multiple times victim to a great play by Aggies wideouts on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to kind of getting ready for Oklahoma State, obviously you have to account for, I think a lot of teams, like you mentioned, they kind of scheme for Ollie Gordon. They kind of set up their defenses to shut out and stop Ollie Gordon, but they do have some really good receiving weapons on this Oklahoma State team. So I think the challenge for Utah and kind of the question for Utah is, how do you balance kind of maybe stacking the box while also containing that the wide receivers? I think this is a perfect opportunity for Oklahoma State to potentially, go deep on some plays, win those one-on-one battles, and try to burn some of those cornerbacks on that Utah defense. And so, like I said, my challenge to Utah and what I want to see from this Utes team is kind of balancing, of course, stopping Ollie Gordon, who is quite arguably the best running back in college football, while also containing that passing game.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see if they can meet that challenge. Utah has some talented corners. Amaya Vaughn, he's really good. Smith Snowden was capable of making great plays. So is Cameron Calhoun. But we've also seen them lose a couple one-on-ones a game. And that's where this one, I don't think I'm expecting Utah to blow out Oklahoma State. I think there's a world where Utah does come in with just a game plan. They're fired up, and just like, because Alan Bowman is not one of the best quarterbacks, even in the Big 12, where Utah can have that success. But I do expect Oklahoma State to have some success moving the ball through the air. We'll be doing a breakdown on Oklahoma State's offense and just their defense and team throughout the week here on Locked On Utes. But just last thoughts on the Utah defense. I still feel incredibly confident in this group. Morgan Scalley always comes up with a great game plan. He made some mistakes last week, admitted them, and I know he is ready to get an opportunity to take on what right now is the third highest ranked team in the Big 12. The second outside of Utah. In the new AP poll, it's Utah at 12, then Kansas State, then Oklahoma State, all sandwiched together, all of them trying to vie for who's the best team in this conference, because it is a three-horse race right now. Arizona and Kansas decided to remove themselves from that race real quick. Very impressed with Kansas State this weekend, by the way. And Arizona was just, they have not looked great. Kansas with those 2 back-to-back losses. So really do think it's a 3-horse race right now in this conference. And 2 of the teams get to play each other. I'm fired up about it. Let's talk a little bit more about this Oklahoma State team, what we've seen from them through the first 3 games. That's what we're going to be talking about in one moment. But first, we have to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes in our great friends at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com and you can download America's #1 sportsbook today. And if you head over to FanDuel right now, yes, you can get the Optum Sunday Ticket, and there are so many amazing NFL games that you can get in on. But we also know why you listen to the show is you love college football so much. So Utah's line against Oklahoma State, 12th ranked team versus the 14th ranked team. Right now, Oklahoma State actually favored by 2.5. That line is something we'll be monitoring all week on Locked On Utes, especially as more information becomes available about Cam Rising's health, as more information becomes available about guys just like Karene Reed and some of the other players that left the game Saturday for Utah. So however you guys are feeling, wherever your inkling may lie, if you are looking to bet on some games with a sports book, make FanDuel yours today. Head over to FanDuel.com and you can download America's #1 sports book right now. All right, Alex, closing this out with a very quick and brief overview of this Oklahoma State team. As we talk, they are 3-0 right now. They got a very good win week 1 against a very talented South Dakota State team. South Dakota State is very similar to how we think of North Dakota State in terms of like that FCS team. You don't want to schedule them because they are a giant slayer. Now, the Cowboys took care of business against South Dakota State in impressive fashion. Game was a little close early, but they ended up pulling away. A game they never pulled away from was in week 2. They took on Arkansas, overtime thriller. Our former Ute, Jaquindon Jackson, nearly got the job done, but give Oklahoma State credit. We still don't really know what that Arkansas team is going to be, by the way. They had not just Jaquindon transferring, but their quarterback came over from Boise State last year too. So still some things up in the air about how good that team is. I think they'll be a middle to bottom tier SEC team in the end, but still beating an SEC team is still something impressive. We bragged a lot last year about beating up on Florida and Florida right now. Oh, don't want to talk about that program anymore for in danger of getting any of that bad juju on us over here. But then you look at their most recent game, totally took care of business against Tulsa. So we get 2 undefeated teams matching up. Something I'm really excited about. I was so excited that I thought maybe College Game Day would want to join the party, but they ended up going to an SEC matchup again. They're going to Oklahoma, Tennessee at Oklahoma. I understand there's a lot of excitement there. Also understand that's the game they're going to get a call. Still doesn't make it any less disappointing. They didn't want to come to the Big 12's top 15 matchup, but that's a conversation for another day. But as we're talking about this Oklahoma State team, Alex, I do think it's one where Alan Bowman to me is not the most amazing quarterback in the world. Obviously, I think Bowman is a guy that he's solid. He's gotten better, but you're still like, he's thrown 8 touchdowns, but already 2 interceptions on the season. And that's not against some great competition either. Obviously, Ollie Gordon's fantastic. I mentioned it. That offensive line has been average this year, and they've been the reason that this Oklahoma State team wasn't able to like blow out Arkansas because they haven't gotten that run game going. I like their receiver room. They're going to make plays against Utah downfield. Defense has some individual talented players, but Utah ranks 21st in yards given up, like just nationally. Alex, do you want to guess where Oklahoma State ranks right now in yards given up? I'm
going to guess a top 10.
Oklahoma State ranks 124th in the nation with 1,388 yards given up. And as I mentioned, South Dakota State, solid FCS team, or a really good FCS team, but like, what are they in the big picture of things? Tulsa's nothing to write home about as a group of 5 team. And then last but not least, yes, Arkansas is solid. Still let them go for over 30 and an offense that I think that the best teams in the country are going to be able to hold under 25 routinely. This is not a great Oklahoma State defense. Heck, right now, they're not a good defense based on how they have performed. Utah, there are a ton of matchups that Utah has the opportunity to exploit. I think this is a game that Cam Rising will really have a chance to go off of. I do expect Cam to play in this game. We'll be monitoring his health throughout the week. but I am so excited for Utah to get their crack in it at a Big 12 team that actually counts towards their Big 12 schedule. This is the start of a new era. I can't wait to see how it begins for Utah. And Alex, I'm curious for you, how do you think this game is playing out? And I want a game prediction as well, my friend.
When I look, like you mentioned, when you look at this Oklahoma State team, they have a lot of holes defensively, and I think there's a lot of opportunities in those weak points of Oklahoma's defense that Utah can really, really, really take advantage of, especially with what we've seen through, I guess, Cam Rising and through what, 4 quarters, however much he's played.
I think 3.5 quarters.
3.5. There you go. But look, a lot of holes on that a lot of holes on the defensive side for Oklahoma State. When it comes to the O-line, I mean, I wanted to go back to our conversation we're having about the defense. Is if we can go back, if Utah can get back to that look that they had against Baylor, to that, kind of what we saw maybe a little bit too against SUU, just out physical that O-line. If you go out there and you take the physicality of that O-line, I think you're going to make Ollie Gordon's night really difficult. And not really allowing him too much space to operate. And I think that's going to be, again, a key to getting a victory in Stillwater, a tough matchup in Stillwater. It is it's a good environment. It's a tough environment. Definitely a true first road test for Utah this season, right? You're still in Utah and in your last away game. This is the first time you do leave the state for Utah this season. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they operate and kind of what their feelings are heading into their first true road game of the year against a really, really good opponent.
It is going to be so exciting to see how it goes out. Do you think Utah's getting the win, Alex?
I'm going to go with an Oklahoma State win. It'll be a close one. It'll be a close one. It'll be a close one, a shootout, and I think Oklahoma State squeaks by. I'm giving it to them just because I do think home field advantage will help them out in this one.
Why don't you take that red sweatshirt off, sir?
I know.
Honestly, this is going to be a tough one for Utah to win. Oklahoma State is very good at home. Cam Rising has not gotten as many reps, I think, as we all would have liked him to have going into this game. I think it makes sense that Oklahoma State is favored. Of course, I think Utah's going to find a way to win. I'm going to talk more about why on the show throughout this week, but I do like the pick, Alex, especially as this Utah team, we think they're going to do great things, but it's so hard to go undefeated. Like when you just look at their schedule and be like, okay, where are the losses going to pop up at? This was always the one going into the season that is the most likely of losses. But we got a long way to go until we get to the game. There's so much fun stuff to still talk about and break down. But Alex, there's also a lot of stuff just to break down in the world of high school sports and in the world of sports in general. And I know you do a great job of trying to keep it all straight, my friend. So where can everyone follow your content at?
Absolutely. High school sports, soccer, college, even sprinkle in some NFL here and there every once in a while. You can find all that at that handle just down below my picture at Napoles Alex. Again, we just try to, over at KSL Sports, we just try to cover everything and make sure we bring you all the topics we can. Obviously, basketball season's kind of right around the corner with off season starting up in October. Crazy. Hockey starts up in October. And so all the coverage of anything Utah related, you can find at that handle right there. That's
still the wildest thing, by the way, is hockey starting up here soon. So excited
Absolutely.
For the launch of the Utah Hockey Club in Utah. Still weird to call them that. I know they're working out all the kinks of the name, but either way, Alex, you do a great job, my friend. Appreciate you stopping by as always.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. And of course, I'll be happy to jump on next time.
Yeah, can't wait till that happens. But this week, Utah fans, we got a lot still coming up. Kyle Whittingham's going to be asked about Cam Rising's health. He's going to give a coy answer, but we're still going to talk about it on tomorrow's show, as well as all the other answers and whatever comes out of Utah's media session, breaking down Oklahoma State. Really excited to dive into the Cowboys film. Got a really fun preview lined up this week with Cody Stovall of Locked On Oklahoma State. I think we're going to have a lot of fun on that one and talk about where Utah can really take advantage of some of the Cowboys' deficiencies. That's this week on Locked On Utes. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football, Locked On Big 12, heck, even Locked On Oklahoma State to learn more about our rival for this game. They all have you covered. That is going to do it for our Monday show. We'll be back with you tomorrow on Locked On Utes. We hope you'll join us then.